You are listening to a Difference for One podcast, episode number 43.
I'm Michelle.
I'm Nicole.
I'm Charisse.
And I'm Cami.
We are the English Sisters.
We come together to share life-changing methods of improvement through a variety of topics.
We hope that above all, these discussions will help you feel that Jesus Christ is making a difference for you, the one. And we also hope that our podcast will inspire you to find simple ways that you can make a difference for one. Hi guys, today it is Cami, Michelle, and Charisse here, and I wanted to start off by talking about a TED Talk that I listened to recently. It's called How to Multiply Your Time by Rory Vaden, and in that TED Talk, he has a lot of interesting points, but one thing that stuck out to me was when he talked about our time management. And first of all, he talked about how time management has more to do with what you don't do than it has to do with what you do. So we should be more selective, and rather than thinking necessarily about our priority list and what things we should be doing first, also taking into account our opportunity costs and the things that we're giving up to do those things we are doing. Because no matter what, you're always saying no to something. And throughout this episode, we'll be talking about how to ask for help. And a lot of times, whether it's asking for help or whether it's just lots of things in your life that you're saying yes to and you're getting overwhelmed by all these things, not only is it, good to say no to things that you feel like aren't as important as others, but also to realize that whether or not you're saying no, you're always saying no to something.
That's a really interesting point. I have heard that before, but I forget that. And I'm actually thinking about specific things in my life that are hard to let go, but maybe I should. And thinking about, if this means more time with my kids or more time to cook a healthy meal or whatever it is, maybe those things could be set aside. And it could be not necessarily no, not ever, but it's not a priority right now. Like, let's set this aside for now.
I like that you said that there's always something you're saying no to, because in a way that gives me a little bit of peace or assurance, like, okay, I don't have to worry about disappointing people because I'm going to be disappointing somebody somewhere. So I might as well just continue to disappoint, And that in a way helps me to let go of the need to not disappoint because it's inevitable. It's going to happen anyway. So I might as well just move on forward.
Yeah, and thinking about all this, we just are thinking about time constantly. And no matter how hard you try, you can never create more time. And when you're prioritizing things, that doesn't create more time for you, and it doesn't help you accomplish all the other items that are on your list when you prioritize. All it does is borrowing time from one activity to spend on another. So in order to create more efficiency in your life, the way to do that is either by doing things faster or just doing more things. And in our society, we're constantly in this rat race of never being caught up. And you would think with all of the tools and resources and access that we have that we would be more efficient, but we're just constantly feeling like it's not enough or that it's never ending. There's always more to do.
My thought about the rat race concept is that there are some things that will always be on my list. Every week, I will need to do the laundry. Every 6 months, there's a dentist appointment, or every year, there's a doctor's appointment. And so those things are always going to be something that is projected out, like going to need to happen type of a thing. You're never going to be completely done with your laundry all the time, or whatever it is. And so there are some things that have to stay on that list, but I think that those things can be prioritized and you can make a good routine and habit of doing those things so that they have their proper place in your life.
Yeah, so that kind of leads me to one of the bigger points that he made in this TED Talk. When he talks about this, we'll call it a task funnel. So with this task funnel, the first step is choosing what you can eliminate. So when you have your list of all these things you need to do, most of the time, there are a lot of them you can eliminate. And this is the biggest one for me because I am the type of person that if I don't write it down, I will forget. And so I have so many things written down all the time. And most of the time, they don't really need to be written down. I don't need to keep track of it in my life. I just feel like at that second, it's important. So there are a lot of things that I should be eliminating that I think are important, but really in the long run, they're not. So the first one is eliminating, and the second one is automating. And so those tasks that are routine or reoccurring that Michelle was talking about, like laundry, dishes, things like that, or paying bills, whatever it is that happen a lot, you can try to figure out ways that you can automate those in your life. So the point is to take the time now to create more time for yourself later. So with paying your bills, you will take the 20 minutes to set up that automatic payment that might seem like a hassle, but in the long run, it gives you what he calls an ROTI, which is a return on time investment. And you'll make up that time that you would have taken manually paying those bills, and then you'll get a return on your time investment. And that is really important because you can't make more time. So you're trying to figure out ways to multiply this. And I think that you have to get creative in this. It's really easy to automatically think there's no way that I can automate these things. But I think we just kind of get in the cycle of I have to do this myself because I always have been. But people find ways, like you get a maid, and I know like there are things that aren't feasible for everyone, but some people don't want to teach their kids how to do chores because it's easier for them to do it themselves, or it just takes time to teach them. But teaching them is what will ultimately create more time for themselves. So just little things like that.
A lot of things that I have wanted to put in the automate mode, I feel like I've been doing better at. One thing that I've been doing recently, and this is just another example, I have a specific breakfast that I'm in love with right now, and I make it for myself every morning, and it's mashed bananas mixed with eggs. And it takes kind of a while to cook on the stove. And I sit around and I loiter in my kitchen waiting for this food to cook. And I've created my own system where while it is cooking and taking a while, I unload the dishwasher. And then I flip it and wait for that side to cook like a pancake. And then I load the dishwasher. And I feel less stressed at the end of the day because I'm doing these dishes that I left in the sink at night in the morning, and my sink is clean during the day when everybody's at school and doing other things. And I feel a lot more peace because I consolidated two separate tasks to kind of be done close to the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great example of automation, and probably a better one than the ones I was giving. I would say that the ones I was giving are probably more linked with delegation, like finding a maid or teaching your children to do their chores.
And as far as the breakfast thing goes, I think it really helps to have something that you like to eat every morning. So you don't have to spend the extra time thinking about what you're going to make. Do you have the ingredients and all of those steps? You just know what you like to eat. You have that routine and habit, and you go, and it saves time.
Yeah, that's a really good example. Something that I have a hard time with is prepping meals and things like that. But I find it really important for me to prepare my meals and my grocery list the week before so that we have all the food we need and I already know what I'm going to be making so it doesn't come the day of and I have to try to figure out things to put together. So yeah, I think those are good examples of automation and probably better examples than what I was giving. I would say what I was talking about with having your children do the chores or getting a maid, things like that, might be more like the next item in the funnel, which is delegation and finding someone else who can do that thing for you. So in this TED Talk, Rory Vaden talks about how he grew up in a house with a single mom and he was in the car with her once and talking to her about how he really wanted a dad. And she said, well, if you want one so bad, then find a dad. And that day he went to like a martial arts class and he met a guy with really long hair and tattoos and, like scary looking. And he ended up being his partner and he turned out to be really nice and they became really good friends and started going to movies together and he'd come over to his house and they'd train together. And then his mom started coming with them to the movies. And he said he remembers the first time that him and his mom went to the movies without him. And he was so sad about that. But now they've been married for years and years. And Rory changed his last name from what it used to be to Vaden. And so he was saying that the moral of that story is that you really can delegate anything. And it's kind of silly, but again, like what I was saying before, that you can get creative and try to think outside of the box. rather than your first instinct of like, I have to do this because if I ask anyone, either I will feel ashamed because I wasn't able to do everything myself, or I don't ask people because I feel like I can do it better than anyone else. And so he talks about how you can be willing to have a little bit of time of imperfection because whoever you're delegating to, they'll learn those things. So it's okay to be okay with like C+ work for a little while, because in the end, that's going to multiply your time. We'll be back after this quick break with a message from our sponsors. So then the last part of this funnel is the me section. And in the me section, it either goes to this is something that I should do now, or this is something that I can do later. And if it's something that I should do now, then I do it. But if it's something that I should do later, then it goes right back up to the top of the task funnel until eventually it'll trickle down into one of those 4 categories. So I'll either have the courage to eliminate it like I should have in the first place, or I'll figure out a way to automate it, or I'll find a way to delegate it, or it'll become significant enough that I'll need to do it myself now. And so he talks about this concept of procrastinating on purpose. And so if it's something that I need to do, but it can be done later, then you procrastinate it on purpose. Because there's a difference between just procrastinating and waiting to do something that you know that you should be doing, but you don't feel like doing, versus waiting to do something because you intentionally decide that now isn't the right time to do it. And so he talks about how procrastinating on purpose is a virtue and it's essentially patience.
I love hearing that procrastinating on some level is a virtue. Makes me feel a little bit better.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the things that I procrastinate on are definitely things that I just don't want to do. And I have come to a point in my life where a lot of things that I don't want to do, I just don't do. Or I figure out a way to not do. And it has caused so much more peace and so much less procrastination. Because I used to be the best procrastinator in the whole world.
Okay, so that's not a bad thing. Okay, so I just wanted to go back through to make sure, as Cami was teaching this concept to me, I was like, oh, I want to use this tomorrow. I'm ready. Let's do this. But let's go back through those steps one more time. So you have what you call the task funnel. You evaluate your task list, right? And if you can, eliminate it, automate it, delegate, or if it needs to be done by you. And then if it needs to be done by you, does it need to be done right now? Or should it be done later? Okay, so with that last step, can it be done later? When you decide that it can be done later, do you need to have necessarily a time scheduled to it? Like, okay, I know that this paper needs to be written by Friday, but I have another assignment due tomorrow. So I need to work on that on Wednesday night, and give it a specific timetable if it's important for you to do it. Or do you just funnel it back through, like just look at that task again tomorrow and decide if it needs to be done now? Because you do want to make sure that the important things fit in where they need to, especially if they have a timetable where they're due by.
Yeah, and first I was going to say, as you were going over those things, that I do think it was important that he put it in the order that he did, and it was a funnel because eliminate was at the top and the biggest section, and me was at the bottom and the smallest section. So the goal is to make the you section the least amount of tasks as possible, with eliminate at the most. So I just wanted to put that in there. And to answer your question, I don't know, I had a couple thoughts as you were talking, because personally, it has been helpful for me to have my task list as small as possible and figure out where I can take a task and assign it to a certain day and time in my calendar. So that way I know that that is getting done at that time. But I will say I've never tried this funnel method myself. And I think that's something that could be really beneficial for me. And a lot of times I assign things to a certain time slot in my calendar without taking it through this funnel, assuming that it's all important and needs to get done. So yes, I do think it's good, like you can give it a time limit, but I think that the point of it, the later going back into the funnel, is that it goes back in as soon as possible until you figure out which one it's going into, like as soon as you can. But I do think that that could have value to have a time limit, if that would be helpful to say, like, if this isn't going to get done today, then I'm going to reevaluate it again tomorrow and put it through the funnel tomorrow or something like that.
What about things that are not pressing, but you feel are really important to do. My hardest things on my task list are things like I have felt the need to have a 72-hour kit or, something like that. If that's not urgent because I don't have a due date, I don't know when a natural disaster might happen or a reason why I would need that 72-hour kit is going to occur, but it could be tomorrow. What do you do about things that you know are really important like that, but they don't have a due date? Is that something where you say you give it your own due date to say, I feel this is really important and it keeps coming back into the list and there's never a priority here. So perhaps I need to give it a due date to make sure that I make it a priority.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like those things are the hardest things for me. Like praying and reading my scriptures are really difficult for me because it's something that should be done every day or that I want to do every day. It feels like it's something I can never actually check off my list, which it shouldn't just be a checklist, but it's like a constant thing. And so
that sounds like an automated thing. Like it should just automatically be in your schedule every day.
Yeah, for sure. But he talks about, and we briefly talked about this in one of the more recent episodes, but about this X and Y axis that's really common. So urgency would be on the X axis and importance would be on the Y axis. So you figure out which quadrant, like this task is urgent but not important, and this task is urgent and important, that kind of thing. But we don't talk about the third axis, which would be the Z axis of significance. And so urgency would be how soon something matters, importance is how much it matters, and significance is how long it matters. So rather than thinking about what is the most important thing I can do today, it should be more about what's the most significant thing that I can do today. And I think if I could implement that mindset better, then those significant things would always be my top priority.
I really like that. I think recently, I don't know if it was in one of our podcast episodes, but I know I heard recently that you want to put the thing on the top of your list that is going to make you feel the most accomplished in your day. And I actually did that with my to-do list the other day. I have 2 columns and I had the stuff that I really need to make sure I get done today, left column. Right column, if it doesn't get done today, I can push it off till another day because I hadn't heard about this task funnel yet. But then I'm making sure that if I accomplish these 3 things, if I make that phone call that's really important and whatever the tasks are, if I do those 3 things, then I'm going to feel like I really accomplished a lot today. So you want to make sure that the things that make it all the way through the task funnel, you want to prioritize and feel accomplished when you complete some of those things.
Yeah, I like that. Nicole isn't here right now, but something that she's really good about is rather than thinking about tasks to do for the day, she thinks about more things that are like, this is the feeling that I want to create in my home today in order to feel like I won the day. And so I really like that because then even if you don't get the tasks that you feel like are a higher priority, you can still be implementing something to feel successful in your day and be creating the life that you're wanting. So really, there's no such thing as time management anymore. It's more about self-management.
Self-management to me in the context of this conversation means, like what you were saying before, if you set up automated things and you take things through this task funnel, that you can really buy yourself time. If you are disciplined in taking your tasks through the task funnel and then doing things right away or conscientiously putting them off, knowing that you'll come back to them if they're important enough, then you can buy yourself time to do the things that matter the most to you or to do the things that don't really have a task attached to them, like spending time with your family or doing those things that just ongoing you have a desire to be spending time doing that don't necessarily have an assignment attached to them. Another thought is that when creating new habits, we've talked about habits in the past, but I think when you take things through the funnel and you want to create an automated habit of something that you feel is important to do every day, attach it to an already created habit. So if you're really good at brushing your teeth every morning, but you want to be better about doing your makeup because that's important to you, you could do your makeup after you brush your teeth or before you brush your teeth. Or maybe it's you forget to say prayers in the morning. just make sure that you say a prayer before or after you brush your teeth, whatever it is, or make sure that you say a good prayer before you eat your breakfast. Something during your day that you have a good, consistent habit of that doesn't change is a great time to add a new habit and practice attaching those together.
Yeah, I like that. Something else that I wanted to talk about briefly that I feel like kind of connects with this time management is another TED Talk that I listened to recently called How to Make Stress Your Friend by Kelly McGonigal. And basically, she talked about a study that was done where people who had experienced a lot of stress in the last year had a 43% higher chance of dying. And who knows, like, what the correlations within that could have been. But that was only true for the people who believed that stress was harmful for their health. So people who had the same amount of stress but didn't think that the stress was harmful had the lowest risk of dying of any people in the study, including the people who had very little stress. So I just thought that was cool because more than the stress itself is the way that we perceive the stress. And so it's important for us to change our mind about the stress. And as she goes on, she talks about what the stress response is like in our body. And when we can recognize the way that our body responds in a stressful situation, we can start to use it to our advantage. So rather than freaking out about our heart pounding and our hands getting clammy and our brain running or whatever it is, whatever way that your body responds to stress, you can train yourself to recognize, okay, this is my body handling stress right now, and you can use it to get through your challenges.
That's a really interesting concept that I'd never thought about it before like that. And I like that theory because how common is it to have stresses in your life that you just aren't going to be able to get around? Stress naturally comes up as part of our lives. Some people might have more stress than others, and you might even become more stressed if you think I need to be less stressful or I need to relax and calm down and not stress out about this because you're worried about the effects that that stress can have on you, that you tense up and it might, like have bodily effects and mental effects and things like that. But to just recognize that it's a natural instinct that we have that is part of dealing with our human nature that we can use as a positive thing rather than adding more stress to the stress by the way we feel about it.
Yeah, and she talks about the oxytocin in our body, and we hear a lot about oxytocin and how it's released when we are bonding with someone. But she also talked about how oxytocin primes us to do things that strengthen our relationships. So the way that our body reacts is similar to stress. It's actually a stress hormone. So she talked about like that you feel oxytocin when you're being nudged to tell someone how you feel, that kind of thing. So she was saying how it's really cool that our bodies created with the stress response, we have a built-in mechanism that creates resilience for us, and that's in our connections. So if you spend time caring for others and creating bonds with others, then that creates resilience for stress within yourself. So with all of these ideas about learning how to multiply your time and changing your perception of stress in your life and creating bonds, creating stronger relationships with others in your life, I think that learning how to not only ask for help, but also learn how to accept help can be really beneficial in this area. So, for example, a lot of times people will say, let me know if you need anything. And people will say, okay, I will. And then that's the end of that. But I would encourage you to maybe think of what you can or already should be delegating in your life. So Charisse had a suggestion. She talked about how when her husband had cancer, there were a lot of people who were saying that to her, like, let me know if you need any help. And so eventually she just made a list of all those people who offered to help. And you can even make a list of all of the things you may need help with or things that you could delegate in your life. And then you can keep track of that and then give people opportunities to serve. So actually use that. Or if you've already been thinking about something in your life that you wish you could delegate, then when someone asks you that, use that as an opportunity. And even if they didn't necessarily have the intention to help and they just wanted to give a nice sentiment, I still think it could be a great idea to give them that opportunity to serve, and they can choose what to do with that. And it made me think that it could be helpful to even pray to ask God when there are things in your life that you're feeling overwhelmed about, to ask Him for people to come into your life that will be able to help you delegate these things. And so then once those opportunities do arise, you'll be ready for them and you'll know what you can ask for help. But a big part of that is there can be a lot of pride when it comes to accepting help or asking for it.
Well, another thing too is that some situations might come into your life that help you to break down that pride and to realize how important it is to accept the help. And so you can either choose to be humble and ask for the help or accept the help when it's offered right away, or perhaps God will create opportunities for you to do that when you have to.
Yeah, and talking about this made me think about a time when I was assigned to help someone and I asked them what they needed and they gave me a legitimate answer. They told me that they could really use some recipes. And I was so excited about that because it was something that I felt like I could actually do to help. And that specifically has just really stuck with me. It really made an impact on me that I said, "How can I help you?" And they gave me a real answer. And so I would just encourage you and myself to think of what things in our lives we can delegate to other people, and when the opportunity arises that we allow others to help us with those things.
Well, yeah. And also, I was thinking about delegate comes third on the task funnel steps, right? So if you're getting to the point where you need to delegate things or want to delegate things, make sure they're things that didn't need to be eliminated and that can't be automated and done efficiently in a process on their own before you delegate them and try to accept that help or ask for it. So going back to the stress thing, I love that you brought that up, and it made me think how important the thought cycle is. We talk a lot about how your thoughts create your emotions, which create your efforts, which creates your outcome. And if you plug stress into the thought cycle, you can have positive thoughts about stress or negative thoughts about stress. And however you choose to think about it is going to determine what kinds of efforts or path your thought cycle goes on. Will it be a positive outcome or a negative one? Will you think thoughts that will create feelings that stress is natural and it just means that my body is properly helping me take care of the things that I need to take care of and get the emotions that I need to have and all of that? And that is then creating the effort necessary to handle these things. And I have the tools to be able to handle it well. And so therefore, then you handle it well, which would be your outcome, as opposed to adding more stress to your stress by feeling completely overwhelmed because your thoughts are saying stress is bad. I've got to get all this stress down. I can't handle all of the stress. Thinking those negative thoughts about stress is then creating negative emotions about the stress and adding to the stress instead of making it productive and helpful to get through the stress. I love it when I hear a new concept and learn something new that quickly plugs into that thought cycle and makes me think, yeah, for sure the thought cycle is real, because these studies are happening that are teaching us that our bodies know what to do. And it's a process that we don't consciously know about it, but it's just naturally happening in life. But now that we know about the thought cycle and that stress can make a difference the way that we think about it, it really can change everything about it.
So, just to wrap this up, in the first TED Talk I mentioned about how to multiply your time, he posed the question of what was God's first commandment. And a lot of times our brain goes right to love one another or love God first, those kinds of things. But actually, God's first commandment to all of humanity was to be fruitful and multiply. And I love that in this context because, it's more than just bringing more children into the world. But God is asking more of us, and one way that we can do that is by being more efficient through figuring out ways to multiply our time and create less stress for ourselves, and to figure out new perspectives on stress when we feel it, not if we feel it, and then to reach out to others and allow others to reach out to us to eliminate that stress. And I believe that that will not only multiply our time, but also multiply the relationships that we have in this life, which I believe will ultimately give us the greatest quality of life. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed, and we will talk to you next time.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. If it resonates with you, the greatest compliment you could give is to share it with a friend who might benefit from it as well. Check out A Difference for One on Instagram for additional content. And if you have any questions, comments, a topic you'd like to hear about, or if you'd be interested in a free mini coaching session, send an email to adifferenceforone@gmail.com.